so think about questions. We're going to do questions in the audience. Do you guys have questions? There's a mic being passed around. I want to make sure you get your questions answered. Before we get started with that, though, did you guys see the nanotechnology? I don't remember the exact name. I think it's the Blue Lantern. Did you guys see the Blue Lantern? Okay, you got to go check out the Blue Lantern.
The Blue Lantern?
We make snap judgments for a living, so you can just show us that.
Basically, it's going to be, flip it over. You basically put your devices in it, and it embeds, or basically covers everything with this nanotechnology that makes it waterproof.
Oh, wow.
And it's pretty cool.
Take a Fitbit, check it in.
Yeah.
Is this like when you put silver in the washing machine, but then you're putting silver into the water system?
I don't know if that's
bad.
Yeah, I have no idea if it's a good thing for the environment or not, but you might want to check it out. It's right on the other side. All right, so who has the first question? I gave you a little bit of time. All right, right in front here. Back here. Sorry, got one mic back here.
Hey there, I'm Ben from the Z Board. Thanks for the shout out, Frank.
Yep, no problem.
I had a quick question about kind of that step from Kickstarter to someplace to Best Buy, and that question is, as an investor looking at a kind of a hardware product, obviously the slam dunk would be them walking in your door, asking for you to fund 10,000 units in inventory, and them having a PO for those 10,000 units. Realistically, that's kind of difficult to do as a company that maybe has less than 10,000 on the shelf. Is there a sweet spot between kind of pre-sold units and just belief that you have as an investor that those units can be sold?
So 10,000 units is not very many units. So don't think about it in that kind of number. All that an order from a distributor for 10,000 units, a retailer for 10,000 units means is that they want to do something, but you're probably not going to get that order from them initially anyway. You're going to get them saying, I'm happy for you to be in the channel, we'll stick you on the shelf in the back, da-da-da-da-da. And it's interesting, there are different, very different behaviors between the distribution points. So for example, Brookstone is a very good distribution point for new product. There's a lot of small stores. You can get a lot of stores, small number of units, distributed broadly and see what happens. Yep. Target is a very good place when your product is selling, because people go into Target and they buy it. But Target's not good for that early part of the curve. So who you're talking to matters quite a bit. And what you're really looking for in those two ranges is a steady growth of the end consumer purchase direct from you, which will cause those early distribution retailers to start to pay attention. But don't think about it in terms of a single PO for 10,000 units, because it's not really the thing that's going to drive it.
Yeah, like I could give a crap about that. I mean, I care more about how sustainable that is, you know. And so, what's the vision you have for continuing to get customer acquisition and continuing to get distribution?
We want to believe that in 5 years you're going to be able to sell 10 million units. And so we don't need you to sell 10,000 now. We want to believe that as a VC investor that there's an opportunity to send 10 million.
Yeah, because I totally agree. These things don't happen. There's not a hyper jump from product to 100,000 unit PO, because remember, it's not really, a PO is not a purchase, right? It's the right to put the stuff on the shelf and see if it'll sell. And if it doesn't sell in one way, shape, or form, it'll either come back to you or you'll be discounting to move it on, right? So there's an organic process of going from, Kickstarter to on your own website, to niche retailers, to more high-end mass market, and ultimately, by the time you're selling in Target, and ultimately Walmart one day, it's a logistics and fulfillment process. They don't sell your stuff. They put the stuff on shelves so that people who've already heard of your stuff, because of the efforts that you've done, can go in and collect them and say, thank you for providing the logistics. So if you think about it in terms of that way, I could be wrong on this, but I haven't heard of any company being able to hyperlink through 3 steps. You just go through a process, and at each stage, the first one step leads to the next.
Well, I think there are edge cases. So accept the reality that every now and then something magical happens. So an example would be in 2004, 2005, Guitar Hero shipped.
Yes.
And they had no idea how much it was going to ship. And it was 2 companies, Red Octane and Harmonix. Yep. Harmonix created the product, and Red Octane was the hardware and the distributor. And I don't know the numbers, but whatever the numbers were, whatever they shipped were sold out in 24 hours.
Right.
And the next order was for 10 times that first order, and it took them 30 days to build that stuff and get it into the channel again. That happens, but don't count on that. That's not the norm.
The problems of success are easily fixed in 30 days.
All right, who's got the next question here? There's one in the front here.
Would that I had that.
So when is the right time to scale? Say you take $150,000 and prove it in a certain marketplace, right? When do you know you have to take the next step and you're ready to take on $2 million to scale this?
When you have enough evidence that you can convince someone of the story. Again, it goes back to like, what do you need to do to raise $2 million? Most people are going to be looking for some demonstration of demand. If you've raised some seed capital before that, 150, depending on your product category, might be too low if you're doing anything that's hardware. But presuming you had enough money to, do the prototypes, get customer feedback, figure out what the right way to distribute it to people is going to be, and you wanted to go out and raise, the Series A to sort of push some of that process. Again, you do the work back. How long does that take you? How long do those conversations to get onto a shelf, if it's a shelf-type product, to get the feedback in? If it's something that takes 3 months to iterate each time, you want to allow for some of that time to iterate. So to me, knowing how much you need to raise is a huge factor of time. Like time is the #1 factor. And followed shortly behind that is, how many people is it going to take to get the work done? So you've got time and bodies, right? Again, hardware, different issue, because your inventory costs are going to be very different. And you might be able to get people to, sort of do it on a leasing basis and things like that, depending on what kind of product it is. But in general, those are the basic math blocks I'd use.
There's also no formula.
Yeah.
So I like to use the phrase, and we talk about this in Techstars, which is an accelerator for those of you who don't know it that I helped start. We use the phrase, raise the least amount of money that you need to get to the next step. And the magic thing about that is you get to define all of the parameters. You get to define what you think the next step is and what the least amount of money you need is. And it varies by context, by product, and by entrepreneur. So an entrepreneur that has a cash flow positive business might decide to raise $10 million because if he or she has $10 million in the bank, he'll be willing to take a $1 million bet or a $100,000 bet and make these bolder investments than if he didn't have that money. Right. Versus a company, if you've raised $500,000 and all of a sudden you've got product sales going, you might not feel the need to raise a lot of money to get to the next level, so there's no urgency. So calibrate it against what you think your arc is, and you define it rather than have the market or investors define it.
And that's one of the reasons it's important to have a lot of even just informational conversations with investors is, what is the next step? Like, so for example, you might think the next step is, I'll raise some money, I'll prove the product works, and then I'll be able to go raise some more money to push it out into the market, right? Whereas the people that you talk to might say, yeah, I just don't believe you have a huge market, so even if you've got that product working, I'm not going to give you money. You need to prove the demand. So their next step is different than yours, and you have no way of knowing that if you just don't get out there and have, invest the time in having enough of those conversations so that you can calibrate what the funding appetite is and what their steps are compared to yours.
With the one pleasing add to that is that, yes, I love entrepreneurs when they have that conversation with me and I say, hey, this is what I need to believe. And what I always tell them at the end is, but I am regularly and often wrong, and I am totally fine with taking the meeting where the guy comes back and says, remember you said it had to be A, B, and C? Well, it's D, E, and F, and I regularly say, okay, I'm willing to change my mind in the face of facts. It's kind of back to what Brad said. The beauty of being the entrepreneur is you control the destiny. We're like, the funding environment is just like the weather. You have to be aware of it. You have to have a sense of what these dudes are thinking. But we don't have the answer. We will think about it for the 1 hour we're meeting with you. We will go away and think about it again in a year. You will live it every day. So just make sure that you control your destiny, understand what we need to get to the next level, and that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur.
And to follow up on that, actually just want to find out, just so they know, timing-wise, how much time do you think that kind of a deal, like let's say they've got 125K or 150K, when should they start the next round? Like immediately? Is that going to take a 6 months process or 3 months?
Depends on his burn. I mean,
right.
That's highly variable, right? He could be burning 20K a month, and that 125K is going to last a pretty long time.
Right. So how much time should they allocate to closing a deal like that, I guess is my point.
Again, it depends on where you're starting from, so I hate to say. But, because I know people who raise their round in 30 days. I know people it takes them, 9 months, right? It really depends on what the appetite is. So think of it the same way you do hiring can be helpful. So you don't just go out and start interviews when you need the person, right? You want to have an active pipeline. So you've always got a bunch of candidates, and then as soon as the slot opens up, you try to yank one in. So much the same way you would do that for hiring, thinking of us we're just a bunch of candidates for you, and there's going to be someone that you want to work with, and there's someone that wants to work with you. So have some modest amount of time that's not too much of a waste for you, and just go ahead and invest a little bit, and don't do it with people that aren't giving you helpful feedback along the way.
The typical range is a day to a year, and the sort of convention.
Averages of no value in that calculation.
Absolutely, average is useless. Median is the number that you care about in this case. And the median probably clusters somewhere between 3 and 6 months.
Right.
They said in unison.
Great.
Yes.
All right, who's got the next question? Over here.
Are VCs like you guys looking at crowdfunding platforms at all, like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Rocket Hub? Yes or no? And then the second part of that question is, what are your thoughts about those different types of platforms?
We invested in one recently. So I recently led a deal for us in Funders Club, which is Kickstarter-like as far as, if you go and you look at it, it feels very Kickstarter-like, but it's actually a platform to invest in the company, not to get the products or to get some bonus for making a donation to the company. So we certainly look at those. I know many investors, they'll look at who's trending most at Kickstarter because it is good evidence of consumer demand. And so if you've got those proxies, it would be smart to have that as a data point. In fact, I care a lot more about the what's trending on Kickstarter than I do about what's trending on AngelList. Because AngelList is, to me, that's not any evidence of actual user paying customer demand. That's just evidence of like who's got good friends that they can go to Bucks with or whatever, right? So I'd much rather know who has people interested in the product. So that's pretty interesting, and you can get that from most of these platforms, whether it's, as at Funders Club or Indiegogo or, whoever it is.
I like to be a user of Kickstarter, etc. I don't care at all about them as a funding vehicle. In other words, they're not things we would invest in as a firm because not the kind of stuff we get excited about. And as a indicator of success of a business, from an investor perspective, it's just another reference point. So I'm not sure that it matters that much in the grand scheme of things from my frame of reference. I do think the phenomena that is very powerful, and this is important to separate, there's a whole discussion about crowdfunding, which is different than the discussion about pre-funding your product using something like Kickstarter. And they really are different. They're very conflated right now, and I think people are confused about that from the outside looking in. So I'm much more, as an investor, I'm much more focused on entrepreneurs who are creating funding for their product than I am using a vehicle like that to do equity funding, which is still not legal. But I think that that's good. In other words, more funding sources and opportunities are better, right? So just separating those two separate constructs.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. In the middle here.
Brad, I saw you kind of make a face when Christine said she didn't like what's trending on AngelList. Do you guys use AngelList?
Which face was it? Was it like?
It was kind of like that. Kind of you disagreed with that.
The man.
But do you guys look to AngelList a lot?
I don't look to AngelList personally in terms of specific evaluation of things we're going to invest in. My Foundry Group, the firm that I'm part of, there's 4 of us. Our fund is a $225 million fund. We have no aspiration to grow. We make about a dozen investments a year that are new investments. There's probably 100 companies a year that we really want to invest in out of all the stuff we see. So if we had infinite capacity, we'd do 10 times the number of investments. So we're not looking for more stuff. If I sneered, I view AngelList as an extremely positive force in the early stage funding, especially at an angel and seed level. And so for VCs, I mean, AngelList is becoming sort of up, I shouldn't say it went up channel. What happened was VCs that weren't making seed investments said, oh shit, we're not making seed investments. We look stupid and we're out of the mainstream. Here's a way to get involved in it, versus the ones that had a lot of natural seed investments. So AngelList was a good model for that, but for an entrepreneur who's trying to raise $500,000 to $1 million, it's phenomenal relative to the other options that existed for that entrepreneur. So I agree from an investor perspective. I think there's a lot of VC investors who are like, hey, if it gets funded at a seed level on AngelList, awesome. For the things that fit in my universe, I'm going to care about it. So again, as a signal for that group, it's maybe less useful, but as a vehicle broadly, I think it's great.
And I think again, I don't necessarily care what's trending on AngelList, which is different from do I like AngelList, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to look and say, oh, that company has a lot of people following it, therefore I'm going to give them a check. Like that's.
I have an AngelList account. I look
Yeah.
at it every day. All the Techstars companies list on AngelList. We take applications now for Techstars via AngelList. Anyone that I'm a mentor on that's on AngelList, I'll endorse. I've recommended a bunch of people who I'm not investors in on AngelList. I'll support that, right? It's a good mechanism for the rest of the people that are not necessarily in that flow to get credibility. I wrote a post about a year ago that was something like why I won't game AngelList. Every day I get N emails where N is a number greater than 1, often a 2-digit number, of people asking me to follow them on AngelList. They are people I don't know. Many of them are trying to be helpful by giving me the specific URL that I have to click on to follow them. But that just cheapens the people that I do want to support, it lowers that. So
That's just spam. It's just spam.
And chiming in just briefly, because I, to some extent, stayed out of this, because by investing, as I say, typically a stage later than
it's
these
too
two
early
guys,
for you.
it's even more moot for me. I mean, we're looking at in-revenue companies that have third-party customers where there's a business, and all this. I mean, all this stuff is great because it creates more entrepreneurial opportunity, which in and of itself is a good thing. There appears to be a high correlation between successful entrepreneurship and high GDP, so go team. But in terms of my day-to-day, I get a lot more data points than the fact that somebody followed somebody and somebody else followed somebody, not of which I know. So I have the beauty of being able to examine cold hard facts when I invest. So knock me out and call me later.
Right. I mean, I think, frankly, one of the best things is just the exercise of putting your company on AngelList forces you to think about some things you might not have thought about regarding your business, because you'll have some question, you're like, oh, crap, I haven't thought about that. So you better to be surprised by a form you're filling out online than be surprised in a VC meeting.
All right, thank you so much for all those questions, and thanks for the great answers.
Cool.
One more thing before we get started, or before we wrap this up, just a lightning round. What would you like to see from a startup here at CES? One more thing. I know you mentioned earlier like what you're investing, but what, like, future hat on, what do you want to see? We'll go around. Everyone get to think about it. Flying cars, like what do you? That's what I want.
well, I want a portable teleportation system.
I'll get right on to that, Brad.
With or without the fly part?
No, I want the teleportation
I know
system
what I
that travels with me.
And you can go anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, great.
I want, my husband and I have an active disagreement on this, at least weekly, where I want to be able to chip my 3-year-old so I know where she is all the time. And he thinks that's wrong. I say, I'll take it out when she's, of a safe age.
They have that for
27.
pets. They have that for
27,
pets,
you
so
know.
can-
The
it's fine.
biggest, the biggest distinction would be like, what's the power source for that? And is the power source something that will get her sick?
Yeah.
And I could put something in the
mobile.
shoes, but a smart bad person's just gonna throw the shoes out, right? So,
Right.
so yeah, that whole
Chip your kids.
personal chip. Like, it's interesting. There was one year at Food Camp where, which is this thing Tim O'Reilly
That
does.
sounds like 1 year at band camp.
It is like band camp, only with many more nerds.
Yeah.
Actually, no, they're both nerds with gadgets.
Different nerds.
Yeah, different gadgets. So where they had this body mod thing, at, the talk was at like a midnight, and so I'm only remembering fuzzily about where they had done this brain implant on someone who was blind, and basically they could see in dot matrix quality, and it was just amazing stuff like that. So I think some of these body mods are very interesting. But yeah, I'd settle for just some self-powered chip that could either be used to find my child or find my keys.
Okay, teleportation, chip your kids.
I just want to make a capital gain, so I have simple needs. First, I
Bring
would
it
like to
home.
see a music deal where the music recording industry did not stick it to the company and say, we need more money to companies that are losing money, because by definition that doesn't work. It drives me insane. In 15 years, there hasn't been, it's so hard to build a business when the people who supply you the raw material think that when you're losing money, you should give them more money. That is just not a viable way to approach life. So I would like the record companies to figure that out, and then I could actually invest in a company that will ultimately cash flow positive. That is one great business need. On a personal level, as I mentioned earlier, I am trying hard to get healthy in my mid-late 40s. I would like not to lose a single calorie of exercise, so I'd like to be able to swim, walk, convert from the Fitbit clip to the arm and get all my calories integrated too, because I'm still sitting there typing all those little The integrated health market is still got a long way to go. When you type in what you're eating, and the nearest thing it gives you, it seems in America, is nobody cooks because the only foods they have in their databases are, you know, from Long John Silver's fish. No, I actually cooked it myself. So I'd like a compelling integrated healthcare app that I could use in my life, and a music deal that I could invest in and make $1.
Hey,
Simple guy.
You know, if you put your recipe into Yumly, it'll do the nutrition calculation for you.
There you go.
Good to know.
Not to pimp anybody.
If a VC didn't pimp their own deals, what's the VC for?
Exactly.
All right, thank you all very much.
You.